Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey peeps, today we're going to take a look at Nitwit from Z-Man Games and designer Matt Laycock, who you may recognize as the designer of Pandemic. In fact, they went out of their way to make sure that you remembered that on the plastic wrap of the game. There was a big sticker that said, "From the designer of Pandemic." This game could not be more different than Pandemic, however. This is a word game, and I would say party game, loosely, that involves knitting, sort of. In fact, I didn't show this in the overview, so I'll show you now. This box, which almost has like a book cover on it, is made to look like a knitter's box. Like it's got like all these little compartments and things like that you put the spools in, which you'll see in a moment. And even the instruction booklet is made to look old-timey, like you might expect from like an old sewing machine or something like that. And so what the game is it's a word game very similar to plucking pears in a sense, or at least the end result is like that, where you're doing word association. Here's some words mixed together, and what's the first thing that pops into your head? But how this works and how you get to that point is very unique. It involves spools and loops and string and clothespins. It's much easier if I just show you. So let's go ahead and do a brief overview of how the game is played. Then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Nitwit is a competitive party game for 2 to 8 players. It's a word game played over one long round. At the end of the round, whoever has the most points is the winner. The game itself requires some setup. You must tie the 8 colored loops to the matching colored clothespins. There are 8 wooden spools as well, numbered from 1 to 8. Depending on the number of players, every player gets 1 to 3 spools and loops, along with a pencil and a score sheet. There are 4 bonus buttons that you use, also dependent on the number of players, and each one has a different number of holes. Stack them up with the biggest number of holes on top. Finally, there are the word cards themselves, which are actually tags that will be held by the clothespins. Printed on them are a large variety of descriptive words. Every game has 3 phases: knitting, answering, and scoring. During the knitting phase, in turn order, each player will place one of their loops on the table. Everyone but the first player must make sure the loop wraps around exactly one spool that's already on the table. Then they will take a tag at random and place it in the clothespin of the placed loop. Finally, you will place a spool out on the table. It must go into any empty space between loops and cannot go where another spool already is. Every player will do this, and with less than 5 players, you'll have to go around and do this twice. The end result of all of this is that multiple keywords will be looped around and associated with any single spool out on the table. For instance, one spool may have loops with tags for flammable, wild, and green. When all players cannot place any more spools, the first player shouts "go!" and every player starts coming up with words or groups of words to associate with each spool and all the words looped around it. This is the answer phase. For instance, maybe loop 1 has the 3 words that I described before: wild, green, and flammable. For that set of terms, someone might think of marijuana, in which case they secretly write that down for number 1. Alternatively, another spool might also be in the green loop, but is also looped to male. So you might write down the Incredible Hulk. You can't repeat a word that's on the tags involved, and if you accidentally choose the same answer as someone else, neither of you will get points. You also can't use the same answer twice on your own sheet. If you're done writing answers, or just can't think of any more, you can put your pencil down and grab the top button on the stack. You'll get bonus points based on the number of holes. When the last button is taken, anyone still writing must stop, and you move on to the score phase. To score, each player must read off their answers spool by spool. Each valid answer is worth a number of points equal to how many loops are around the spool, unless your answer matches someone else's, in which case it's worth nothing. If an answer sounds like a bad match, you can always call Nitwit and demand an explanation from the person who's currently reading. The accused has 10 seconds to explain why their answer is good. Then, each player votes simultaneously, thumbs up or thumbs down, to determine if the answer is valid or not. Majority rules. When all players have given all their answers, add up the points together with your bonus button points. Whoever has the most is the winner. On to my final thoughts. I want to stress above all else that I love that they tried something incredibly unique and different with this game. I've said that many times in the past, and I think that as I'm getting on and doing reviews over several years now, and just playing games in general, hardcore all the time for several years, I am starting to see the same things over and over again. Even if it's a big elaborate game like another review that's going up with this one, Rum and Bones, where it's like big flashy miniatures and all these different things, the actual core mechanisms and much of what's in that game feels very similar to a lot of other games. And I've just noticed this happening, and I love it when I see a game that bucks that trend and just goes for something really unique, which is what they went for with Nitwit here, from the design of the game and how you actually utilize the different components to where, okay, it's not like terribly thematic because you're not knitting anything, but you kind of are. You're knitting together these different words, and how you actually use the spools and the thread and the clothespins is very unique. They didn't have to do it that way. They could have just made this into a simple card game, but they went out of their way to give you a better experience. This is more of an experience of a game than anything else, and so I really like that they went for that, because they could have taken the easy way out, and they didn't. And I think the game does look good. The components are good quality. The box is a good quality. It all just looks very, very good. As far as the... so I'm talking about innovation here, but the very core element of this game I have played before, in the sense of plucking pears is the closest thing I can think of, where I only played plucking pears once. I don't own my own copy, but it's where you have different images together. Then you quickly have to write down what comes to your mind first. And just like in this game, if I'm remembering correctly, you get penalized for having the same answer as someone else. So that seemed very familiar to me. But again, how you got to that point in this game was very, very different. And I think that ultimately that is sort of this game's downfall. I like what they were going for here, and I like word games and mixing them all together like that. But the best way I can describe it is clunky. Getting from where you have your spools and your thread, and then putting them all together, knitting section, and then getting to the point where you're answering. There's just something very odd about the tempo and the rhythm of this game, if I could use music analogies for some reason. Music and knitting, whatever. Because it's just... I expect, assuming you want to call this a party game, let's start there, okay? I've actually seen several games like this that kind of skirt the boundaries of what's traditionally considered a party game, like Spyfall and like Codenames. And this goes up to 8 players, and it is very frivolous in a sense, and frivolity is a better way to say that. I don't want to downplay what this game is, but it's just supposed to be for fun. So yeah, okay, from several different angles you can see this as a party game. But it doesn't really feel that way when you're playing that. The whole first part, the knitting part, where you're just putting strings out and making sure everything's very carefully done, it's just kind of like, okay, we just have to kind of get through this. Let's just power through this. Because as unique as it is, it just kind of feels like you're going through some motions. And then you're like, okay, great, let's go. Let's write down our answers. And then you do all of that. And it's like, it's so exciting. Everyone rush, grab the button. That's all cool. Okay. And then you get to the answering part. And then it just screeches to a halt again. And it's like, all right, let's go around and around and around. Now, when you actually get to the answers, sometimes it's very funny. There was a lot of, I don't know, I guess I would call it unintentional laughter that ensued when we were playing this game, because some people just write really ridiculous things, and trying to listen to people defend their answers can be hilarious at times. But I wasn't sure if we were even playing the game how they intended. We were just kind of, shooting the shit and having fun and just seeing where it goes. The game just felt so... I think I'm kind of all over the place here because it's kind of hard to talk about this game. But I feel like this is an activity more than anything else. It doesn't feel very tight. It doesn't feel like there's a way for you to soldier through the game very quickly. It just feels like you go through this kind of long, drawn-out process in the beginning. Then there's an excitement as you're writing down your answers as quickly as possible. And then you just kind of go through the motions to see if you score or not. And you might have some fun unintentionally at that point. But then it just comes back to, okay, who got points? All right, I guess we're done here. And it's probably a little bit too long than it should be, especially with more players. I feel like the sweet spot for this game is probably 5. Because at 5, you are only each putting out one loop still. With less players, you're putting out multiple loops. So at 5, you're putting out just one loop per person.
and spool, but then you still have enough words out there for it to, or enough players for it to be interesting. But then is it still considered a party game? That's kind of what I'm talking about here. It's hard to peg this game down. That's why I think it's more of just like an odd activity than like a really tight, well-designed game. I give it tons of points for creativity, but ultimately the fun of this game is just like, hey, how much fun interaction can I have with my friends? And that, or just random people in your group for that matter. But that I feel like is something I can get from a lot of different games. What this game brings that's unique to the table is just the whole knitting aspect and the spools and the thread, which is all kind of superficial, because actually using those things in the game is kind of tedious. So it's fine. I had some fun with it, but having played it a few times, I don't think I would ever play this over any other game like either Plucking Pairs or any kind of word association game like Codenames that does what this game sets out to do, but faster and more streamlined and just in a better way. So I love the presentation. I love the idea of what they were going for. And there's going to be some people who really love that so much that they're going to gravitate towards this game and want to keep it in their collection. But that person wouldn't be me. So that is Nitwit from Z-Man Games. Only from me.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.